is our 27th day in captivity. So far...
Thinking about your next travel destination? Well, you might want to scratch a few names off your list. And by a few, I mean a whole bunch. Welcome to today's episode, where we dive into the most dangerous countries for Americans. From political unrest to kidnapping threats, these places are best left pins on your map rather than stamps on your passport. Buckle up, it's going to be a bumpy ride. Number 1. Central African Republic, CAR. Starting off with the Central African Republic, or CAR for short. And spoiler alert, it's not a car you'd want to drive. This country has been in turmoil for years, with violent clashes between government forces and armed rebel groups. The situation is so volatile that even the UN peacekeepers have their hands full. For Americans, the risks are sky high. Kidnappings, robberies, and attacks are as common as sold-out signs on Black Friday. And forget about sightseeing. If you're spotted with a camera, you might end up in the middle of a firefight instead of taking snapshots for Instagram. So unless you're filming a documentary on how not to vacation, it's best to stay away. Number 2. Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso might sound like a cool name, but it's definitely not a place to test your adventurous spirit. This West African nation has become a hotspot for extremist groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. I mean, when your local neighborhood features these guys, you know it's time to look at real estate somewhere else. For Americans, the threat of kidnapping is sky high, and we're not talking about a take-me-out-to-the-ball game kind of kidnapping. We're talking about serious ransom demands. The government has very little control outside the capital, so if you find yourself in the countryside, you might as well be in the Wild West. Consider Burkina Faso the frontier you don't want to explore. Number 3. Yemen. Yemen, land of ancient history and unfortunately modern-day chaos. Once upon a time, this was a thriving tourist spot. Now, it's more like an extended war zone, with ongoing civil war, bombings, drone strikes, and a humanitarian crisis. The situation is grim. As an American, you stick out like a sore thumb, and not in a good way. The risk of being kidnapped by rebel groups is alarmingly high, and these guys don't exactly negotiate over tea and cookies. Yemen has some breathtaking scenery, but unless you're into dodging airstrikes and roadside bombs, it's better to admire it from Google Earth. Number 4. Venezuela. Venezuela, a country that once had it all. Stunning landscapes, rich culture, and oil wealth. But now, it's mostly famous for economic collapse and crime rates higher than your blood pressure after a double espresso. Inflation has skyrocketed, making everyday goods impossible to find. For Americans, the risks go beyond just pickpocketing. Kidnappings, violent robberies, and express kidnappings, yes, that's a thing, are everyday events. Walking down the street as a foreigner here is like wearing a sign that says, "I have cash, please rob me." So unless you're looking for a thrill-seeking adventure, this is one trip to cancel. Number 5. Ukraine. Ukraine used to be a favorite for budget travelers, but now it's more like the set of an action movie. Minus the safety nets. The ongoing war with Russia has turned large parts of the country into active conflict zones. Shelling, gunfire, and missile strikes are just another Tuesday here. As an American, you could easily be caught in the crossfire. And trust me, nobody's going to stop mid-battle to check your passport and give you directions. Even the safest cities are on edge, so if you were planning to explore Kyiv's nightlife, you might end up seeing fireworks of a different kind. Number 6. Syria. Syria, home to ancient wonders and currently one of the world's longest-running conflicts. The Syrian civil war has left much of the country in ruins. For Americans, the risks are off the charts. The U.S. government has even labeled Syria as a Level 4 estate do not travel destination, which is as serious as it gets. Kidnappings, bombings, chemical attacks, it's a literal war zone. Unless your idea of a vacation is dodging artillery fire, I'd recommend checking out some photos online instead. It's safer, cheaper, and you don't have to worry about stepping on a landmine. Number 7. Sudan and South Sudan. Sudan and its younger sibling South Sudan are both embroiled in turmoil. Civil wars, violent protests, and armed militias make these places a constant danger zone. For Americans, it's like a choose-your-own-adventure book, except every choice leads to the same ending: get out while you can. The government control is shaky at best, and foreign visitors are prime targets for kidnappings and ransom. Whether it's tribal conflicts or political chaos, there's never a dull moment. It's best to leave these destinations off your bucket list for now. Number 8. Somalia. Somalia is a country that's been synonymous with piracy for decades. And no, we're not talking about the fun, swashbuckling kind. The risk of kidnapping is extremely high, especially for Westerners. Here, pirates don't sing shanties. They demand ransoms. And it's not just pirates you need to worry about. Terrorist groups like Al-Shabaab are active here. They're not picky about their targets. And an American passport is practically a bullseye. So unless you've got a strong desire to recreate a scene from Captain Phillips, it's best to sail far, far away. Number 9. Russia. Russia, the land of vodka, bears, and, let's be honest, some serious tension these days. Since the invasion of Ukraine, political relations with the West have soured faster than milk in the sun. For Americans, just being here could raise suspicions. You might find yourself accused of being a spy for merely asking for directions. And if you think you can just charm your way out of it, good luck. The Russian legal system doesn't have a lot of room for American humor. It's safer to stick to Russian dressing on your salad and leave it at that. Number 10. Afghanistan. Afghanistan is under the control of the Taliban, and let's just say they're not handing out tourist brochures. With the U.S. having pulled out in 2021, the situation for Americans is more dangerous than ever. Extremist groups are prevalent, and kidnappings are not just possible, they're likely. The Taliban isn't exactly running a 5-star customer service desk for foreign tourists, and getting detained could mean a very long stay. Unless you're a fan of high-risk environments, I'd recommend steering clear. Number 11. Mali is another West African country struggling with terrorism. Armed groups and kidnappers operate freely, making travel risky. Americans are prime targets for kidnapping, and the U.S. Embassy can only do so much. So unless you have a secret desire to negotiate for your own ransom, steer clear. Number 12. Libya. Libya has been in turmoil since the fall of Gaddafi. Armed factions control different parts of the country, and violence can erupt at any time. Kidnappings are a constant threat, and foreigners are often seen as high-value targets. This is one desert adventure you'll want to skip. Number 13. Lebanon. Lebanon is facing economic collapse, and the situation on the streets is tense. Protests, armed clashes, and a lack of basic services make it a risky destination. For Americans, there's a high chance of being caught up in violence, so it's better to hold off on that Beirut sightseeing tour. Number 14. North Korea. North Korea is infamous for its strict regime and hostility towards foreigners, especially Americans. You can't even breathe without permission, and any minor infraction could land you in a labor camp. Unless you enjoy guided tours with a side of propaganda, give this one a hard pass. Number 15. Iraq. Iraq has a lot to offer in terms of ancient history, but modern-day Iraq is fraught with violence. Terrorist attacks, bombings, and kidnappings are common, especially in areas outside of Baghdad. It's safer to read about Mesopotamia from a history book than to visit its ruins in person. Number 16. Iran. Relations between Iran and the U.S. are tense, to say the least. For Americans, the risk of being detained is high. The government might accuse you of being a spy just for asking directions. It's safer to admire Iran's beautiful architecture from afar. Number 17. Haiti. Haiti is struggling with political instability and gang violence. Kidnappings are on the rise, and foreigners are often targeted. The risks outweigh the rewards, so unless you have a strong reason to visit, it's better to stay away for now. Number 18, Belarus. Belarus is currently under a strict regime, with protests and political crackdowns common. Americans could face detention or other legal issues simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's not exactly the friendliest place for tourists right now. Number 18, Burma, Myanmar. Burma, or Myanmar, has been in turmoil since the military coup. Protests are met with violent crackdowns, and foreigners are at risk of arbitrary detention. The once popular tourist destination has become a hotspot for conflict, making it a dangerous place for Americans. Well, there you have it. Our list of countries where you might want to avoid flashing your American passport. Remember, the world is a beautiful place, but some corners are better seen from a distance. Stay safe, keep traveling smart, and choose your destinations wisely. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment below on where you'd like to see us cover next, hopefully somewhere a bit safer.